I'd like to call this meeting to order for Public Works Meeting 20-10 for October 19th, 2020. Members of the public are advised that our meetings are webcast live by the City of Hamilton,
Sound effect?
temporarily archived on the city's website. As well, a reminder that all electronic devices are to be switched to a non-audible function during the meeting. And now I'll commence a roll call, so please indicate your presence with your name. Councillor Collins.
Here.
Councillor Farr. He's across the street at Starbucks and will be joining us. Councillor Ferguson.
Here.
Thank you. Councillor Jackson.
Present, sir.
Councillor Marula.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Mann.
Good afternoon, I'm present.
Councillor Pauls.
Okay, I thought you were going in order there. I'm here.
It's alphabetical. Councillor Pearson. Thank you. Councillor Vanderbeek. Not seeing Councillor Vanderbeek. And Councillor Whitehead. Not seeing Councillor Whitehead. Thank you. Madam Clerk, are there any changes to the agenda?
No, Mr. Chair, there are no changes to the agenda. Thank you.
That's always a good sign. I need a mover and a seconder to approve the agenda as presented. Moved by Councillor Johnson, seconded by Councillor Nan. All in favor? Oh, sorry, Councillor Johnson, you're just joining. Councillor Marula, seconded by Councillor Nan. Just pulling up the vote, assuming I'm in the right meeting. Yes, I am.
I'll have to indicate manually, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. You're in favor of the agenda? Thank you. That's carried. Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations this afternoon? Not seeing any. On to the approval of the minutes of the previous meeting for October 5th, 2020. I need a mover and a seconder to approve the minutes. Moved by Councillor Ferguson, seconded by Councillor Pauls. All in favor? Councillor Pearson's wandered out of the frame. Councillor Marula is in favor. Thank you. That is carried. On to delegation requests. So item 5.1, we have a delegation request from Peter McAllister of Stelco, Canada, respecting a request to amend bylaw 06-026 and bylaw R84-026. And this is a request for today's meeting. So if this delegation is approved, we will hear Mr. McAllister in item 7 under public hearing. So I need a mover and a seconder to approve the delegation for today. Moved by Councillor Ferguson, seconded by Councillor Pauls. All in favor? Councillor Marula, did you want to speak to this? No. Okay. You're in favor. Got it. Thank you. That's carried. On to consent item 6.1 is the intersection control list for wards 2, 13, and 14. Need a mover and a seconder to put this on the floor. Moved by Councillor Farr, seconded by Councillor Jackson. Any discussion? Not seeing any. All in favor? Thumbs up from you, Councillor Marula. Yep, thank you. On to items 6.2 through to 6.4. This is consent items for sustainable mobility programs, airport employment growth.
Hi, everyone. This is Alicia from Clerks. Unfortunately, Councillor Danko is experiencing some technical difficulties. So if I could, Councillor Marula, as Vice Chair, ask you to take over temporarily at this time until we can get his issues resolved. So I have unmuted you, but I just can't hear you, Councillor.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Do we have an active speakers list at this point? What item are we on?
So currently we're on consent items 6.2 to 6.4. So we just needed a mover and a seconder to receive.
So that's moved by Collins and seconded by Farr. All in favor, and it's an electronic vote.
We do have Councillor Jackson on the speakers list.
And Councillor Jackson, the floor is yours.
Yes. Can you hear me, Vice Chair?
I can indeed.
Thank you, Vice Chair Marula. Through you to, is Director Bainbridge there from Hamilton Water?
Mr.
Or
Bainbridge,
should it be,
Mark?
or is it for General Manager McKinnon if he's there? I'm not sure who's representing.
Who would like to answer this question?
I am here. It's Mark Bainbridge, Director of Planning and Capital for Hamilton Water. Dan's on the line, as so is Andrew Grice.
Oh, thank you, Director Bainbridge. Thanks, Vice Chair Marula. Just a question. Obviously, we've had lots of announcements up at the airport and for the Airport Employment Growth District, Mark, as you know, and Pantone, Tony, and Amazon, all the great announcements. We're the #1 cargo airport in the country. And your report is an information report about the capital works and infrastructure. Can you give a quick cursory status as to, is the infrastructure from the city's end of it servicing upgrades to the infrastructure to the airport and within the airport lands that we own? Is our progress staying current with the capacity that's needed with all the companies and the future employees that will be coming to the airport? Mr. Vice Chairman, through you, please.
Mark.
So to your question, Councillor, we are monitoring the growth and development in the airport growth district through our planning partners, and we have a capital works identified and moving forward to keep up with that growth and development as best that we can to increase the capacity of the facilities at that location along Upper James that are servicing the airport area and the airport itself.
So you're satisfied, Mark, with the status. The last thing, Mr. Vice Chairman, I would want is additional investment by businesses and companies and corporations that wish to invest in Hamilton at the airport, but unfortunately hear about the servicing and the infrastructure that may be lagging. So that's what I just wanted my comfort level to be raised, that Director Bainbridge is saying everything is on track and on course. Just get that last reassurance from him, please, Vice Chairman Marula.
Yes, Mark.
So through you, Mr. Chairman, the projects, we are maximizing the capacity at that location at this time. So we have upgrades that are moving forward to increase the capacity to the maximum that we can at this time.
Okay, Vice Chairman Marula, I'm satisfied by that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. So that was moved by Collins and seconded by Farr on 6.1. All in favor, and it's electronic vote.
Through you, Mr. Chair, this is Alicia from Clerks. Just letting you know that we do have Councillor Nan on the speakers list as well, please.
My apologies. Councillor Nan, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Vice Chair Marula, and no need to apologize because you can't see the speakers list as it comes up. So to staff, through you, on the Sustainable Mobility Programs Annual Report 2019, and I apologize because I can't seem to get the appendix up, but I just thought, given that things have changed quite a bit in 2019 as residents have moved from one form of mobility to another. Just wondering if there's a high level quick summary. I noticed that in the cover sheet report there was indication of active transportation trips that were being used. If you could please, through staff, just get a couple of those highlights out.
Hi to the chair. I'll take this one.
Hi, Peter.
Hi, through the chair. I just so you can. I guess you can't see the appendix, which is sort of the glossy report.
Before you start,
It
Peter,
just loaded up. It took a while, but please go ahead.
Before you start, Peter, if I could just interrupt, I believe Councillor Danko is back. Mr. Chairman, can you hear us? Oh no, are you able to function? Okay, Peter, go ahead. We'll wait.
So just broadly, the report covers the activities that took place in 2019, including some of the active transportation projects that we implemented on the ground, including the bike lane projects. It included a lot of the success around our workplace program. So again, we have the three major spheres: is workplace, schools, and community. So with the workplace program, we're actually launching a new carpooling tool, especially now around COVID, that is more suited to the modern workplace and does include support for teleworking. And then, so we've had some success there in also rebranding the program, and we came to council previously on our report that now has made it regional. We're working only in partnership with Metrolinx, but mostly actually delivering the Smart Commute program through the regions. On the school side, there's a list of schools that we've done school travel plans for, so we're working through with those schools still. I know, of course, it's an odd time, but it gave us an opportunity to continue a relationship with the schools that we have in order to finish their school travel plans, and we've listed the schools there. And then on the community side, like I said, it lists the bike infrastructure projects that we've implemented, and also obviously we're aware of the bike share, both positive and negatives, and we're coming with another report in November on that. So that's just more broadly the three spheres, and the highlights are actually in the report there in terms of the numbers quoting.
Just checking my mic.
The report itself actually builds on each of those categories in those three areas.
Excellent. I appreciate it. And in being able to see the PDF now, we've had over 500 plus community engagement initiatives through the city itself, as well as our partners from McMaster University City Lab 101 Day in Hamilton, and as well as getting a clear sense of the numbers in terms of how much Hamiltonians seem to be taking on alternative transportation and choosing sustainable active transportation as a mode of transportation. So I thank you. The report was beautiful, and that's it for now.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Nan. We have Councillor Farr on the speakers list. Councillor Farr, the floor is yours. Councillor Farr, we can't hear you.
Oh, thanks, Mr. Vice Chair. Can you hear me now?
We can't.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Through you, Mr. Chair, this is Alicia from Clerks. Yes, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Oh, okay. Councillor Marula was having some. Okay. Well, I just wanted to say thanks to Peter and all the staff, and as this report recognizes, answering a call for yearly updates. Probably, I think it was Councillor Marula a few terms ago that maybe asked for this annual update. What Peter and Brian and so many others do throughout the year with specific updates to things like Smart Commute or bike share or anything to do with TDM, and there's a whole lot of things that fall under that with cycling master plans and our truck route subcommittees and all of that. It's much more consistent. We're often updated by our experts in this field, this very important and from this report growing field. and it's very much appreciated. And that includes the hard work they do outside of regularly updating council on individual items. Mr. Vice Chair, through you, Clerk, myself and Councillor Collins moved all 4 items, or was it individual items that there's 4 items here, and I'm not sure what.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we already took a vote on the first item because the intersection control list does require approval, whereas these 3 items, 6.2 through 6.4, only require receipt. And if I could just take this opportunity as well to let everyone know that Councillor Danko has resolved his technical difficulties, so he is back in the chair at this point. Thank you to Vice Chair Marula.
So the 3, Mr. Chair, welcome back. It looks like we've lost Sam. The 3 items to be received on the floor, moved by Collins, seconded by Farr. Okay, thank you.
No other speakers on the consent items. So these were moved by Collins, seconded by Farr. I know Councillor Marula had a motion he was planning on putting on the floor regarding 6.4, but I'm seeing he's offline now, so he can move that as a notice of motion if necessary. Okay, so to receive the consent items, all in favor? Hang on, I'm just eScribe at the moment. There we go. If anybody was wondering why that happened, is the City of Hamilton IT department decided to update Windows 10 at this very moment. I'd like to thank the City of Hamilton Windows IT department. Has everybody voted in eScribe? We're having now a glitch with eScribe. I voted. Okay, so we're gonna restart eScribe and then we'll revote on 6.2 through to 6.4. So we're just waiting to reissue the vote. So you should see the vote reopened in eScribe. Okay, seems to be working. Thank you. That's carried. So on to our public hearings and written delegations. So we have Peter McAllister from Stelco Canada respecting a request to amend
asking me to restart everything.
06-026 and bylaw R84-026.
What's your dad, Barb?
So at this time, I'd like to call on Peter McAllister from Stelco Canada to delegate respecting a request to amend the bylaws previously mentioned. Mr. McAllister, you can unmute your microphone and turn on your video. You do have a 5-minute time limit. However, if committee wants, we can pre-approve an extension to that prior to the delegation. Do you think you'll be within the 5 minutes, Mr. McAllister?
I think there may be further questions, but my presentation should last about 5 minutes.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
And then once we receive the presentation, we have an option to either just receive the presentation or we can refer it to staff for a report back. So, Mr.
Very good.
McAllister, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you very much. I'm just sharing my my PowerPoint that I've created. Can everybody see? Can all the councilors see that?
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for allowing me to make this presentation to the Public Works Committee. I just thought I'd sort of give a quick summary of why we're here. First of all, city staff has asked us to amend the city sewer bylaw in order to clear the infrastructure consent condition in our severance. So it's the two elements are connected, which I will describe a little bit more in detail as we go through. The city staff has stated that the amendment to the bylaw requires council and Public Works Committee approval, and believe that I think that the staff has stated to me that they believe that there are certain risks that only Public Works and Council can take on for the improvement of the city of Hamilton. This is the actual severance. Back in October of 2019, approximately a year ago now, we had applied to the Committee of Adjustment to create the 7 parcels that you're now looking at. This is the site. I assume that you can see my laser pointer here. This is Industrial Drive. This is Mana. This is Stelco's head office right here. And this is the lake. This is where Randall's Reef is. So that is the entire property. And we have subdivided it for basically for internal corporate purposes. That's the only reason we're doing it, is to separate the operating footprint of Stelco from the remainder of the land. Stelco spent at this point probably close to about $1 million supporting the completion of this severance. Consultants, legal, we had surveyors creating the parcels because obviously they have to be registered on time. We've also committed through our discussions with the city to complete what I'm going to refer to as a master servicing plan for the site. We have, as of right on the property right now, the ability to make any applications for site plan approval for anything that complies with M5 zoning, which is quite a broad industrial-based zoning. And that is what our plan is to, obviously long-term, is to maintain that. The master servicing plan, which I'm referring to, we've discussed in detail with that, and we've attached that to a development agreement, a draft development agreement to staff, in order to provide them with a comfort that the master servicing will allow the structured development of the entire site with the city staff approval. No site plan applications will be made to the city until the master servicing plan is submitted for review, and thus no development will be approved on the entire site until the master service plan is submitted. The reason I'm highlighting this is one of the issues I think the staff has is the creation of the 7 parcels gives them a little bit, although I'll allow them to address their concerns. We believe that this master servicing plan will provide them with the comfort level that they need in order to truly understand how we're developing the property. And in order to connect the last piece here, one of the points here is that we are attempting to provide the staff with this comfort in order to allow the orderly development of the project. We don't want to sort of come forward with 25 SPAs. It's a massive piece of property. It's about the same size as downtown Hamilton. So it's a massive 800-acre site. And we want to make sure that for both parties, the city of Hamilton and for Stelco, that it's done in an orderly fashion. And thus the master servicing plan was created in that process. In order for us to obtain our consent for the creation of these 7 parcels, though, the city has asked us to ask you for an amendment to the sewer bylaw, which we would be offside of the moment that we complete the severance, because there's a limit to the number of parcels that are able to be connected to independent services prior to connecting to a city service. And at this point, it's 3 parcels. Obviously, we would need that amended to 7. I just thought I'd also take a moment and show you some of the visions that we have for the site. We're trying to create something that is unique on the property. This is the Ottawa Street slip. This is Industrial Boulevard, which currently has nothing more than a barbed wire fence along here. And this is a truck turning area. This is normally Stelco's main entrance into the site. And so we're trying to create a very, very unique and excellent service for the industrial market that is currently, obviously with Amazon and other initiatives here in Hamilton. We are receiving a tremendous amount of interest in our property and in the site overall. Obviously, the other major element for my request for you to support this and allow us to move forward with our severance is, of course, the growth for the city of Hamilton, employment in this area. The east end of the city of Hamilton has an employment element that is just perfect for a lot of the users that we're looking for, that we're trying to bring to the site. At the completion of the entire redevelopment of the property, we're talking approximately $12 million in tax revenue. And of course, one of the best elements of this is the reuse of what is I'm not going to be impolite. I'm from Burlington, know exactly what Stelco is to Hamilton. It is a historical employer on this site, and it's a historical employer within the city of Hamilton. And we believe that we are going to be a very unique redevelopment project within the city of Hamilton and provide employment for the city and growth for the city. And of course, reuse a property that for many years has been underutilized. So that's the end of my presentation. I just wanted to thank you very much for it and ask for your support for this redevelopment of this historical site by assisting us in the approval of this bylaw amendment that I outlined in the letter. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. McAllister. So we'll go to questions for Mr. McAllister. We also have staff available from Public Works and also from Planning and ECDev to answer any questions. So go to questions to the presenter, we'll receive the presentation, and then go to questions to staff. So questions for Mr. McAllister. I see Councillor Ferguson, followed by Councillor Whitehead. Councillor Ferguson. And if you just don't mind closing your presentation, Mr. McAllister.
No problem.
Okay, can you hear me now?
I can hear you, Councillor. Yes.
Perfect. So, Peter, thanks for coming in. And I've been wondering about this property for a while because it is a vacant piece of land. And as we see what's happening in other parts of the city in our industrial parks, industrial development is really popular right now in our city. And it would be great to get this idle industrial land back into production. And so so I clearly understand what your ask is today. You're asking that you create, and I'm going to use a common expression we use, a condo road to run servicing in and provide access to the various lots that you may be selling off for redevelopment. And there's an issue with city policy about having a common privately held road and servicing emptying into our storm and sanitary sewer system. Is that the ask today, Peter?
Yes, to some degree. I mean, we're looking for an amendment to the bylaw just to comply with the severance. I think that it would be, as you can tell by the severance, it is a very, the lack of a better way of putting it, it's kind of the rest of the land. And it's a very uncontrolled kind of piece of property. Ultimately, this property, if it properly is developed, will have millions of square feet of industrial development built on it on this vacant property. In order to provide that, the ability to move forward with that, we do need to amend the bylaw. Now, we're going to come back in any case to the city in many instances for redevelopment and for creation of a different structure in order for us to develop the property. There are complications with it. It is a very unique site, and that's part of the issue. There are environmental issues on the property. However, we've been monitoring those, and we believe that we can meet the province of Ontario's criteria for industrial development in order to do that. Obviously, we can't do that for residential, but that is where and these lands are designated Zone 25 within the employment zone. So it's clearly something that we're moving forward with as industrial.
Yeah, you say it's a zigzag piece of property, but it's 800 acres. It's a huge piece of property too.
It's massive. It's massive, and it's basically 3.5 kilometers by 2.5 kilometers.
And you still, all these properties, some of these properties would have water access to them.
Yes, ultimately they will. Yes. Yeah.
And they still have heavy rail access.
We have one of the historical elements of this site is that there are. It's the largest privately held rail system in the country. So,
okay,
at one point,
it's still operational, can still be put back in service.
Not that extent, but yes, there's a lot of rail that can be redeveloped, and then that's obviously many of the industrial users that are in the market right now are very interested in rail.
Of course, there's good truck traffic access through Burnaby District.
Exactly. We have 3 lights, and you're on the Queen Elizabeth Way.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'm really excited about this, and I really want to see what's going next. So, at the appropriate time, once we receive the presentation, I'd like to have put me on the list for staff.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Peter. I always thought that there was real promise and it was underutilized property. So it's great to see that we're moving that yardstick. There's been a lot of development in the context of what's happening internationally in trade and all the offshore and the shipping cost and now the politics around China. So I had said at the beginning that we got something that a lot of people got rid of. And that's K zoning. So when you talk about industrial, you're talking prestige industrial, or you're talking maintaining a prestige K zoning.
I'm sorry, I'm not familiar, Councillor Whitehead, with K. Did you say K zoning?
Yes, that's heavy industrial.
Oh, heavy industrial. Okay, that is covered on. I believe Jason and his team could probably confirm, but I believe that is covered under the M5 zoning that we have.
Okay. And I often thought Hamilton strategically was one of those predominant locations for what I call intermodal transportation. That's water, rail, and air.
Yes.
Now, you indicate that there's some rail there, but right now it's not viable infrastructure.
Some portions of it, Councillor Whitehead.
So is it connected still, though?
Yes.
When I say connected, is it connected to the main rail?
Yes, it's connected directly to CN Rail.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so anything we can do to optimize employment, be cognizant of the neighborhood in the context of heavy industry and smokestacks, and we certainly don't want to make life and air quality worse in those areas. So I don't know how we control that. We have to make sure all stakeholders around the table. But I'm looking forward to these employment lands taking off. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead.
I have Councillor Pauls, followed by Councillor Marula. Councillor Pauls.
Thank you, Peter. I was just looking at my notes, and it says right now we have a 3-parcel land, right? And really, you have 7 parcel. And if we were to say, okay, would it be a joint service agreement with Stelco that you would take on the other 4, or how would that work?
Yes, there is right now there is actually, when Manna came in and purchased, this was pre-Stelco, pre-current Stelco. Mana came in and purchased 2 pieces of property from U.S. Steel. And at that time, there was a joint services agreement entered into with the city, Mana, and Stelco to deal with the services on the site in order to provide the ability to move forward with that property. And that way, Mana, because one of the properties that Mana has is landlocked. It's up at the northeast corner of the property. And that northeast corner of the property is not serviced properly. And so we, under our joint services agreement with Mana, we completed a understanding for access, for road access, for water services, gas, various other services that we're maintaining for them in order to utilize the properties that they have. In some instances, because of the other parcel, which is down on Industrial Drive, they've been able to make direct connections with the city on some of those services. But we could manage the process with a joint services agreement.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pauls. Councillor Marula?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome, sir. I'm just curious, just from a downside perspective, what downside do you see the city subjected to as a result of potentially considering this?
I think that if I'm to paraphrase, and the city staff are here, if I'm to paraphrase the city's concerns, they've listed a number of them. We believe that and that's part of the reason why I highlighted what I refer to as the master services plan. When I came forward to the city and spoke to Jason and his team about this, my main concern was not to have a disjointed development of this project, and that we wanted to look at it in its whole, in its entirety, so that we end up with something that the city understands what we're doing and we understand what we're committing to in terms of tenants, because obviously we don't want to be in a circumstance where a tenant is told, okay, well, you can't do that or you can't do this, because we're still trying to sort out something with the city. So we wanted to look at the property in its entirety. The master servicing plan was intended to do that, and we worked through the content of that plan with the city staff, and have entered into and have a draft development agreement in front of them that would be registered on the property for the purposes of making sure that we do structurally build this property in an organized manner. So I think, to answer your question, the biggest problem that we could face on this property is a disjointed development. In other words, another way to look at it is, I put 25 site plan applications under M5 zoning, which I'm entitled to as of right. And on the 26th, we sort of go, oh, we can't connect the sewers to it because we're over capacity or because of that. So what we've done is we've undertaken a very detailed analysis of the type of uses that we're planning on bringing here, the market in our consultation with CBRE, to bring us to a clear understanding of the nature and the type of tenants that are coming to the property. By doing that, we are in a position where we understand those demands on the property, and thus we are eliminating that risk for both parties, for the city and for Stelco.
And through you, Mr. Chairman, I'm glad you mentioned the types of use, because I think this is a great opportunity for the city. If you could focus in on the parameters that presently exist in, for instance, the Red Hill Valley Industrial Park and that of Lancaster. If you are willing to sign on the dotted line that you will have pristine industrial, I'd be supporting what you're presenting today. And I think that's really the issue, is the types of industry and how it affects quality of life. For years, as you know the history of Hamilton. You're from Burlington.
Yeah.
So it's the air quality issues. It's the fact that we have an opportunity here to reverse decades and decades of pollutants in our neighborhoods. And unlike 30, 40, 50 years ago, when people were paying very little for homes within walking distance of the industrial core, Today, they're paying a lot more money and they're paying a lot more attention, and they have a great deal of efficacy, and they're focused and their intent on preventing any more smokestacks. So I think this can be an incredible opportunity for the city and for Stelco. And I think the real easy solution to this is simply adapt to what the Ancaster Industrial Park, the parameters they have on those acreages, and I'll support it today. And so I'll say that publicly and provide notice accordingly. I think this is a great opportunity for Stelco, but more importantly, for the east end of Hamilton, and actually for the entire city of Hamilton, and the airshed issues that we've been challenged with for so many years because of our industrial core. So I appreciate your time and the efforts, and I look forward to landing this because it'd be nice to have an industrial park like Ancaster has in the east end of Hamilton. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. Councillor Nan. Can't hear you, Councillor.
Try that again. Thank you so much,
Yes.
Chair. Through you, couldn't agree more with Councillor Marula's last comments in terms of the cumulative impact on our population and residents from the older industrial North End, and what's possible if we approach, if you all are approaching at Stelco, the redevelopment of these lands in a way that promotes a cleaner environment for everybody, not only the environment, but most importantly in terms of helping the city reverse some of the life expectancy impacts as well as other health impacts as a result of the toxicity of past industry in that area being concentrated. Just one question, if I may, through you to Mr. McAllister. How does your current plan in terms of the master servicing plan and what you have intended for the 7 parcels align with the city's Bayfront industrial strategy, which is still under development? I assume that you're at the table, or at least committed to the work there. Yes. If you could please provide a few comments. Thank you.
Yes. Nice to meet you again, Councillor.
Nice to meet you again, too.
I met you actually just after you got elected. So very nice to meet you again. I'm a member of the Bayfront strategy. Once I discovered that it was ongoing, I actively have participated in all those meetings, and I'm looking forward to continuing to participate in those. I think it's probably premature to sort of say we're going to do this, we're going to do that in terms of this. You may have noticed, and I talk Councillor Mule's comments about the Ancaster Park and the more pristine industrial. We have had tenants that have approached us, and we have not taken them because they're not in alignment with my vision for the project and for the property. We do want to try to create a different feel for this property, and by doing that, we can attract tenants to it that are stable and being able to provide Hamilton with a good base for employment, plus of course Stelco for benefits within it. I think probably one of the most important things that I can tell you is that, without sort of going into the details of the Bayfront, the fact that we're sitting at the table with the Port Authority and with all of the other elements of along that Bayfront waterfront strategy, we believe that we can make a serious impact on this property. The only difference I will say is from Ancaster or from the Red Hills Industrial Park, the reality of it is that this site is a historical site. I'm sure, as I sit here at this table, all these councillors have an uncle, a brother, a son, or somebody that worked at Stelco. And you may or may not have noticed on my renderings, there was these little red things on the screen. I have walked this property from back to front and all over the entire site. And there are massive steel artifacts on that property. And in the master servicing plan that we are putting forward to the city, we've hired landscape architects to assist us in creating some historical, I'll call it, touch to the site, and giving a recognition that This was a major site in Hamilton for what it was, and we can do both. We can achieve that, and I think that aligns with the Bayfront waterfront strategy. To circle back to your question, Councillor Nan.
Thank you, through the chair. And I appreciate that you're here delegating specifically to the bylaw amendment, but it is an opportunity for us as committee to hear a little bit about what you're projecting for the Stelco lands. And from that perspective, if I may, through you, Chair, just hear if there are goals primarily around a climate target, and if that is part of your deliberations in developing your master servicing plan, as well as your intentions for the lands.
The answer to your question is yes, we have. When I completed the master plan for the site in the first year of I've been at Stelco now for 2.5 years. When I completed my first year, we worked with Urban Strategies, who has an office in Hamilton. That group, we also took a look at the operating pollutants, we'll call it, from the current facilities, and ensured in our master plan, and as we brought forward tenants, we would ensure that that would not be an increase to that type of a, I don't know exactly the technical or engineering word for it, Councillor, but that was the intent. We were trying to make sure that we identified what was being produced on the site now, and then said, okay, we don't want to increase that in any way, shape, or form. We want to try to move it towards a more, as Councillor Mullian had mentioned, a more pristine environment. But I can't tell you definitively what those levels are. I can show you in drawings. I'd be happy to meet with you and show you what we have that we've been able to identify.
Fair enough. I'll pause there, as I do want to respect that we are here in terms of the amendment request and your delegation. They're happy to take the conversation offline in terms of what your climate plan is for the land. Thank you.
Be happy to have that with you.
Thank
you. Seeing no further questions from committee, I do have a couple questions myself, and then we'll receive the presentation and go to questions from staff. So Mr. McAllister, you mentioned in your presentation talking about 7 parcels. I think you said 800 acres. I'm trying to get a sense from you specifically the scale of this development. You mentioned geographically, I think the size of the entire downtown core. So just so I'm clear, we're talking about massive redevelopment opportunities here.
Yes, all redevelopment, Councillor Danko, and in terms of what we've got here, it's just so you understand the split, because obviously Stelco as an entity is still a major employer within Hamilton, and it is going to remain on the site for this, don't quote me on the numbers, but I would say generically you're dealing with an 800-acre site. I believe the actual number is 796 acres. And I apologize, I can't do the hectare conversion that quickly. But it is a 800-acre site. 250 of those acres are going to remain Stelco. 550 acres of it will be redeveloped.
Thank you. So Stelco will still be on site, still producing, still employing, still paying taxes on 250 acres, and the remaining 550 is open for redevelopment. Okay.
Which is the purpose of the severance, to separate the operating footprint corporately from the real estate.
And the reason you can do that is this is excess land that's not needed for Stelco's core operations?
Correct. And some of the buildings are derelict. So some of the buildings need to be demolished and removed from the property.
Thank you.
It's dangerous, to be honest with you.
Right. And through this redevelopment, I mean, obviously there's a huge economic growth and jobs and new tax revenue to the city potential here.
Yes.
And Councillor Nan and Councillor Marula touched on the redevelopment. So as this is a fairly contaminated brownfield area, is remediation also part of the plans?
The property itself is like from a remediation perspective, Honestly, the councillor, pardon me, Councillor Danko, the land itself is slag. Almost all of it, it was filled in. I actually have a plan of the original shoreline versus what it is today. They stopped filling the lake in 1973, but the slag is not a something that we need to. It's not very structurally sound for us, but for a large portion of the site, it is adequate, we'll say, for industrial development. I don't think anybody's interested, and given, as I always joke, we're not building residential towers out on the waterfront.
Right. And I think that's core. So will be remediated, but for industrial development.
Exactly, for industrial uses. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Those are all my questions. I'm not seeing any other questions from committee, so I need a motion to receive. Moved by Councillor Farr, seconded by Councillor Ferguson. All in favor? And then we'll go to questions to staff. Councillor Farr and Councillor Marula. Just waiting on your vote. Councillor Marula, thumbs up. Thank you. And that's carried. Thank you. On staff, Councillor Ferguson, I had you on the list, so please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'll direct it to either Dan or Jason, but they can feel free to deflect it over to Andrew or, another planner if they like. But this is very exciting to finally see those derelict surplus Stockholm lands being set up for redevelopment. And as Councillor Marula and Councillor Nance said, a cleaner redevelopment, something that be more suitable for the residents in that area. So clearly we're anxious to moving this along. So Dan, my first question to you is, you don't like, I'm going to use a residential expression, but a condominium road servicing these lots when they go in and have one common sewer that they all hook into, ultimately discharges into the city sewer, I assume out on Burlington or Industrial Drive. So can you just explain to me what the problem is and how we fix that?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Ferguson. So the idea of a condo road was the first thing that came to my mind when I became aware of this file, and we would be happy with that. I guess the challenge at this point is from the development perspective, that's not an option that they feel they can pursue at the moment, and I probably need to rely on Jason to speak to the finer points of it. But when you use a condo corp or a condo road style development, what that affords us as the operating authority for the drinking water system and the sewer system is a single entity for us to deal with if we have a problem relative to the quality of drinking water, metering issues, backflow prevention, sewer discharge, all those things that we have to monitor and keep an eye on with respect, especially in an industrial setting. It gives us one entity to deal with. Unfortunately, I think and I'll paraphrase, and Jay can correct me if I'm mischaracterizing this, but I think in the way that this is being developed and some of the question marks that Stelco has about the future and how they're going to dispose of the land, they can't kind of go that route right now. But a condo corp would be consistent with the bylaw. That happens all the time, and we're quite happy to take that approach. But I think some of the nuances around this development are preventing them from doing that. But maybe I can ask Jay to expand on that.
And General Manager Thorne is on the meeting, so.
Jason, do you want to expand on that?
Yes, I can. Jason Thorne, General Manager of Planning and Economic Development. So through you, Mr. Chair, Dan's correct. We deal with these types of things through a plan of condominium on a fairly regular basis, and the advantage of that being that essentially your condominium corporation is the entity that you hold responsible for maintenance of the asset, as well as if anything goes wrong. With the application as being proposed right now is not through the plan of condominium process, but through the consent process. So it is creating 7 separate parcels, which initially the intention, according to Stelco, is to still retain ownership of all 7 parcels, but essentially there would become 7 legal parcels. And so the issue and why it's in front of Public Works Committee, and I recognize that PW Committee doesn't normally deal with development applications, is that a condition of the approval of the consents by the Committee of Adjustment was a servicing strategy as to how these 7 separate parcels would be serviced. And that servicing strategy is something that PED staff is working through with Stelco, and there are a number of aspects related to that. But they are predicated on an amendment to the bylaw to allow for multiple properties to have a single connection into the municipal system. And
Okay,
so
but
without that bylaw, we can't approve the servicing strategy, and that having those multiple connections into the city system is something that has caused concerns for staff.
So even though there's 7 severances, I kept hearing Peter talk about tenants, and I just heard you confirm that Stelco wants to retain ownership of all these parcels of land and put tenants to put a development on their lands and connect. So is it not like a condominium corporation if the land is owned by one property owner, which is Stelco, for that accountability to maintain? And or is, and Dan may know the answers better than I do, is your concern that because it's an industrial site, some of them may be looking for, and I think the word used is oversight agreements, because they may want to put more contaminated product into the sewer than what they're permitted, and you have difficulty of finding out who it is that may be putting pollutants in the sewer that is not acceptable. Is that part of the problem? So my first question is, Dan, is that question, is that part of the problem? And the second back is Jason. If there's one common owner for the whole thing being Stelco, where's the issue? You got one company accountable because they own it all. So Dan, I'll let you answer the first question first.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, you're exactly right. There are a number of scenarios that the bylaw seeks to, number one, prevent, and if they do occur, give us the ability to react to them. And so, in essence, the challenge here would be is if you've got a proponent or a landowner some distance off the road allowance, and something is happening where they're discharging contaminants that are not legal as per the sewer use bylaw, or we've got a concern about backflow prevention and a threat to the drinking water system, we wouldn't have access to the property. Under the scenario where Stelco owns the land, they would be the person that we would, or the entity that we would go to. But I think one of the concerns here is that over time we lose the ability to have control if Stelco does decide to dispose of some of those properties. Then we have no visibility, no control, and really no authority on what's going on kind of behind the curtain a long ways off the road allowance.
Okay, just a question to that then, Dan, before I go back to Jason. Could we not arrange them, because this is important for the city to get these lands back in productive use, could we not require under the servicing agreement that a manhole be installed near the condominium road, for the lack of a better word, from every tenant, so there's access in to see where contaminants are coming from?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yeah, our ideal situation would be where the sewer and the water services leave the city's road allowance. It is at that point you put a meter and a backflow prevention device and a sampling manhole. But the challenge is going to be that if it starts to service a bunch of different properties, we inevitably would get drawn into any conflict around who's putting what into the sewer and that kind of thing. And my experience is that, notwithstanding the fact that something may be attached to the title, the city always gets drawn into those circumstances. And so I think that's what we're seeking to avoid, is just some clarity on who's going to be that single entity that we would go to.
Okay, it sounds like we need to refer this to staff for a report back to us, so we have it in writing exactly what your concerns are and what your recommendations are. But my own personal view is we need to somehow make this happen, because it's good for the city. I like the 12 million in new taxes and all those new jobs. So Jason, if you have one property owner being Stelco, and as Dan says, you hold Stelco accountable through a backwater valve in the water main and access to the pipe to be able to measure any contaminants that are in there, how is that not as good as having a condominium? What's the right word here? A condominium
corporation
agreement. Corporation. Okay, thank you.
And just real quick, we're just at your time, Councillor. So, General Manager Thorne, you can answer the question, and we can put you on the second time if need be.
Okay, go ahead, Jason.
So through you, Mr. Chair. So the result of the consent would be that there are 7 legally separate parcels of land. And as I noted, and I think as Mr. McAllister noted as well, it's Stelco's intention, as they're stating now, that they would retain ownership. But once the lots are created, there is nothing stopping them from selling a block in the future. And so that's what's different from going down the condominium process, is notwithstanding that the same owner may initially own all 7 blocks, they are 7 legally separate blocks that could at any time be sold. So that becomes a challenge for dealing with some of the concerns that Dan has raised around holding a single entity accountable through a joint servicing agreement. If at some point in the future, it could be a year from now, it could be 20 years from now, those 7 blocks start to fall under separate ownerships.
Okay, and Mr. Chair, thank you for your time. When you're finished with questions, if you come back to me, I'd be happy to move that we refer this to staff for report back to committee.
Okay, will do. Councillor Nan, followed by Councillor Pearson. Go ahead, Councillor Nan.
Thank you, through the chair to staff. So in terms of the concerns from the city, it is chiefly about accountability and ensuring that the municipality isn't then taking on the burden of what may or may not necessarily take place, but fundamentally in terms of provision of ensuring the quality of our water and maintenance of our any kind of impact on our system. So I just want to make sure that I summarize that correctly, because similarly to Councillor Ferguson, I would definitely appreciate a fulsome report on this before we make any kind of decision on the request of the delegate. I also want to make sure that we're not setting ourselves up to do what we've done in the past, or not us necessarily around this table today, but like in terms of past generations have made in terms of facilitating industrial development without taking a wholesome look at what the potential impact is, not only on air quality, which has been spoken about already, not only about remediation of the land, which the chair had mentioned, but most significantly around the water, and given our obligations as a municipality on that front. So if I could just, one, get a quick summary that I got that down right in my notes, and then two, also seeking more information in the form of a report. Thank you.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, maybe a scenario might be helpful. You've essentially paraphrased it correctly, Councillor. And if in the future, say parcels 1 and parcels 3 were sold, and we would always ensure that we had the proper backflow prevention, the proper metering, and the proper sewer sampling facilities at the property line, so we had access to them and we could see what was going on. If, for example, it was identified as a high-risk property with respect to the drinking water system, and for whatever reason the backflow prevention device was not being looked after properly, we wouldn't take any chances at that point. If they went out of compliance with that, we would just shut the water off. So if the property owner at parcel number 1 was doing everything that they were supposed to do, and possibly even at parcel number 3, if we don't have a single entity to go after to make sure that that backflow prevention device is being serviced properly, notwithstanding the fact that those 2 property owners are doing everything they're supposed to do, now we're into the private property. Now we're into a private arrangement where we're trying to negotiate that. And that's one of the areas that, certainly from my own experience over the years, just gets incredibly messy. And it's something that the sewer bylaw, our bylaws, seek to prevent, so that we don't have to get drawn into private matters.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I have Councillor Pearson, followed by Councillor Whitehead. Councillor Pearson.
Thank you. And Dan, thank you for the previous comments there. So I certainly understand the apprehension. Obviously, it wouldn't be before us today if staff knew there was a way of wrestling this out to a positive solution. So I'm just wondering, though, I guess through legal, and I support it being referred back, certainly want to see this development move forward. Is there no way through legal, once title, the 7 entities come in and the lands are sold and severed off, that there's a blanket sort of easement or document that can be registered on title for each particular new property owner?
Covenant.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Covenant or easement. Dan, would that not be possible? I'm not sure that's legal, so I know it's not really your bailiwick, but.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, maybe I could rely on Jason. I think that's an area that there's been a fair bit of discussion about with respect to this file, but maybe Jason, or I'm not sure if anybody from legal is on the line. If I could hand it to Jay.
Yes,
Okay.
through you, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry, I don't believe anybody from legal is on the line, but they certainly are part of the conversations for the exact reasons that Councillor Pearson has raised. What we have been looking at is a form of agreement that would be registered on title. So it would carry with the land, and it would be registered on all. If the 7 blocks are created, it would be registered on all 7 titles. So it would carry with the land. We have not, to this point, gotten to the stage where we have agreement over what should be in that agreement that effectively would cover off all of those concerns that Dan has raised. But that is an ongoing conversation that we are having. If we can get to the point where we can have something registered on title that provides for the accountabilities, that provides for a clear mechanism for dealing with some of the risks that Dan mentioned, maintenance of the assets, all of those sorts of things. That is the path that we are, or a conversation that we are actively having with Stelco. But as I said, the approach ultimately will depend upon and be predicated on a need to amend those bylaws to provide for multiple connections into the city's system. So if this is referred back to staff, we will certainly continue those conversations, see if we can get to the stage of having a development agreement that mitigates against those risks. And then ultimately would then be back in front of council and committee as to whether or not that is sufficient protection for council to then be comfortable with the amendments to the bylaw.
And thank you for that. And I believe we can get there. But we're talking about the sewers, but is there also a concern about overland flows and contaminants? And the reason I ask is I have a facility in my ward. I'm sure some staff members are aware that we had a spill in the summer that did get out to Lake Ontario. It was not, at least it hasn't been proven yet through the ministry yet that it was anything hazardous, but still it can happen. And the safeguards, what safeguards would be put in place to protect depending on the type of business that comes in. This particular operation in my ward is a food chemical processing business. And they have berms or whatever you call them that contain any spills on the property, but there unfortunately was a leak or a crack in one of them. So how is that going to be addressed as well? Certainly understanding the ward councillors and the issues of contaminants ongoing into the future.
Yeah, so through you, Mr. Chair, that is it's an excellent question, and that is part of the master servicing strategy, as was noted. That was the condition of the approval, that there be a master servicing strategy done. Overland flow is a component of that. We've not yet come to resolution on that. It will require some sort of city easements across the property to maintain for overland flow. So that there are other aspects to the servicing strategy as well. The piece that's in front of you today relates to those, particularly to those bylaw amendments that are tied to the sewer and water connections. But the council is correct. There are other aspects to the servicing strategy, of which overland flow is one of them.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I still have time, just one last question: is there a time restriction, or there's a time issue with Stelco on this moving forward, or do we have time to continue to work on this?
So through you, Mr. Chair, yes, there is a time consideration in that the Committee of Adjustments consent approval expires. I can't remember the precise date. It's in January, at which time that approval would lapse. So we have until then to get resolution on all the various conditions and for staff to clear all of the various conditions. The bylaw amendments would be among those. We have until January to do that.
And staff will be doing everything they can to meet that deadline.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess my first question is, I was going to raise the land title issue. I put a covenant on the land title and register, but the problem with that, as I understand it, is that it's not enforceable after 40 years, because if it was, then I wouldn't have the dilemma I have at Shed Oak Properties when the land was donated by, I think it was McLaren Farms, to the mountain to preserve healthcare. And of course, a good chunk of those lands are no longer doing that. So I would want to know what are the mechanisms in the context of that 10-year review on title, or 40-year title, what protections we would have. And I hope to see that contained in the report on a go-forward basis. But I think it is an option that could be considered. I just want to make sure that those doors are closed in regards to any escape clauses or any other confusion to what we're trying to achieve. So I was wondering, in the land servicing agreement, excuse me, you got the bylaw. Is there anything that impacts on transportation, driveway access, vehicle that we should be concerned about in the context of servicing this particular block of land?
So through you, Mr. Chair, at this point, we don't have, and Stelco doesn't have what the precise proposed internal circulation network would look like. And there is sort of a preliminary sense, but I think given how large the site is, and I think that there's not necessarily clarity about who the ultimate developers or who the ultimate sort of businesses are that will set up there and what their land needs will be. I appreciate that it's a challenge for Stelco to try to think about the ultimate parcelization and internal street network of the entire site at this stage. So what we would be building into any approval would relate to no parcels being developable until they do have road access. I would anticipate that ultimately it is not going to be a public street going through the site. Mr. McAllister noted a couple of challenges with that, notably the safety issues and having sort of public vehicles interspersed with commercial vehicles in an industrial site. So we most likely are looking at some sort of condominium road ownership ultimately, but those details have not yet been worked out.
I appreciate that. I was more concerned about having adequate parking in the context of employment that doesn't push the vehicle traffic out into neighborhoods because there isn't adequate parking servicing the overall project. So I just wanted to say that. The last question is, we had trouble with international of the build rail cars, National Railway. Is that what they're called, Jason?
Through you, Mr. Chair, National Steel Car, are you referring to?
Thank you, National Steel Car. So reaffirmed today was that a good chunk of that land had slag put on it, and a lot of the land that was recovered to some degree was slag. So National Steel Cars had issues with flooding. There is suggestions that Lake Ontario could increase in elevation in the context of water. And it's pretty clear that those lands aren't all that high in regards to elevation from the water line. So what is contemplated when we talk about, because I mean, if you get flooding right over the land and everything's on it, that goes right into your system. So I guess the question I have is, if we anticipate with climate change and all these concerns, what are we building in to safeguard the broader community or our own services from water retaking back some of those lands?
So through you, Mr. Chair, as Councillor Pearson noted as well, overland flow is one of the aspects of the master servicing strategy that we'd have to look at. I know Mr. Sergi is on the line if you wanted sort of some detail in terms of where we are at right now, but we've not yet come up with a final agreed upon plan through the servicing strategy as how to deal with overland flow, but that certainly is one of the active conversations that's happening right now, and that is something that staff would have to be satisfied on before we would clear the servicing condition.
Yeah, you know, I'm not talking about the natural overwater flow issues. I'm talking about, well, I mean, I guess you can call them, depending on if climate change is true and water rises. We're talking pretty significant impacts on stormwater management on the water line. So when you mention that, are you talking that's part of the consideration, or is it something that enhances the concern?
So through you, Mr. Chair, I may have to see if Mr. Sergi can answer that question in terms of we plan for certain storm flows, but I can't speak to the details of that. I don't know if Tony is able to.
Mr. Sergi?
I save time because Sergi, he's great at explaining things. I'll have a conversation with him offline. Don't want to tie up the public works. I think it's important to understand water could rise and it could cause, when you're reclaiming land that is basically at the same elevation, it could raise concerns for the broader services in this community. So I just want to better understand what actions are being taken to ensure that we're not at risk. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm not seeing any further questions to staff on this item, so I'm going to go to Councillor Ferguson for a motion to direct the appropriate city staff to review the presentation and report back to Public Works Committee. Councillor Ferguson?
Yeah, I'd like to move that the request from Stelco for a servicing solution be referred to staff for a report back to Public Works Committee as soon as possible, but no later than December 7th, 2020, which is the last Public Works meeting in 2020.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Pearson. Did you wish to speak to this, Councillor?
No, I think we've had a good talk about it, and I think staff understand what we're looking for.
Okay. Any discussion on the motion? Moved by Councillor Ferguson, seconded by Councillor Pearson. All in favor? And Councillor Collins, Councillor Marula, give me a thumbs up. I see the affirmative. Thumbs up from Councillor Collins as well. Is Councillor Pauls in the meeting? I think she had to step out. So we can mark her as absent for this. Yep. Thank you. That carries. On to discussion items. Item 9.1 is the transit passenger shelter agreement. I need a mover and a seconder to put this on the floor. Moved by Councillor Jackson, seconded by Councillor Marula. Any discussion on item 9.1? Not seeing any. Councillor Whitehead?
Moving it.
It was already moved and seconded.
Okay, no problem. Call the question.
All right, all in favor? I think it was Jackson and Marula. Councillor Marula, you're in the affirmative. Thank you. Got everybody? Yep, thank you. That carries. On 2 is the solid waste management update, bylaw update. Before we jump into this, I understand that the draft regulation for the Blue Box transition was released this morning, and Angela Story is the manager of business programs is with us, and I'm wondering if she'd like to provide a quick verbal update in advance of this. Angela?
For sure. For sure. Good afternoon, everybody. So through you, Mr. Chairman, we just wanted to update that this morning, to kick off Waste Reduction Week, the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks released their draft proposal of the Blue Box transition, which will go to producer responsibility. So you know that we've been waiting this announcement since 2019. So we've done a quick review of it and wanted to share some information with you. So the goal of the Blue Box transition by the province is to improve recycling across Ontario. And the proposal would make producers responsible for collecting and managing Blue Box materials, expand the scope of the Blue Box materials that they collect, maintain or approve existing Blue Box services, including creating one common Blue Box system in Ontario. They would expand the Blue Box program to additional collection sources. Not too much expansion in Hamilton is noted because we already offer these, but in other municipalities they don't. So they're looking to expand it to multi-res apartment buildings, schools, retirement and long-term care homes, and some public spaces such as parks. And finally, it makes the producers responsible for meeting those performance targets like diversion rates. So as you know, the transition will take place between January 2023 and December 2025. In the brief review of the proposal, we did key in on the schedule that they have proposed for transition, and it looks as though they are looking at a geographic implementation schedule. And although the City of Hamilton requested to transition in 2023, the schedule in the proposal is showing Hamilton on the list to transition in 2025. which is along with our neighbors in Halton, Guelph, Brantford, and some other municipalities. We do see that Toronto, Sarnia, Ottawa, and London, kind of some of the bigger players along with us, they're scheduled to transition in 2023. And in 2024, we see places like Waterloo, Stratford, Peterborough, Niagara. So we have 45 days to fully review the proposal and submit our comments back to the ministry. So they are due on December 3rd. So outside of this update right now, we are working on an information update, which will come to council in the next couple of days. We'll put together our comments and we will have a Waste Management Advisory Committee meeting scheduled in November so that we can review our comments before we submit it back.
Thank you, Angela. I've got 3 speakers on my list. So technically there's not an item on the floor here, but if there are questions of Angela, you can open up the floor to that, but I just ask you to be brief, recognizing that we will be coming back with an information update and going to Waste Management Advisory Committee. So if there's questions for Angela, have Councillor Collins, Ferguson, Pearson, and Whitehead. Councillor Collins?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Mine was related to the whole issue of stranded assets. And so we had talked earlier about municipalities have obviously assets related to the delivery and collection, the collection and sale of blue box materials that would include possibly trucks, equipment, as well as property. And so I'm wondering what the legislation says surrounding the whole issue of the assets that we and others have related to blue box materials and how they'll be treated with the transition and the timelines that have been proposed.
Yeah, thanks. Through the chair. So I haven't got into the nitty gritty of that part of the proposal yet, so I'm sure there's something in there about it. But I will note back when this program started in August of 2019, we did look internally at the city's waste program to see what assets we would have that might be seen as stranded. There could be other uses for the building at the MRF, et cetera. Part of the equipment is owned by the contractor and part of the equipment is owned by the city. So we have to deem if items continued for use or not. And as you know, the recycling trucks currently are owned by the contractor. So outside of, maybe the trucks that we're picking up in parks or picking up in litter containers, which we would have to determine how we would continue that model. Not totally sure yet what the overall look of stranded assets would be.
Thanks, Angela. Last question would be budgets. So do we know what impact this will have on us? Is there a refresher that will come back in terms of operating costs or savings associated with the transition to the private sector?
Yeah, so we don't fully know savings yet outside of the work that we did when we were preparing our proposal for the transition date. So when we came to, I guess it was Committee of the Whole in May, we brought our Blue Box transition preferred date report forward. So we had selected 2023, as you'll recall at that time. So just looking at the alternatives for consideration in that report, if we went in 2025, which as I said, that's currently what we're looking at now, if we go by their report, it says the city would be responsible for the full Blue Box program costs in 2023, which we estimate to be $13.4 million. And 2024, which we estimate to be $13.5 million. And then depending on what point in 2025 we transition, if we transition 3 months in or 6 months in, we're going to be responsible for the part of the budget for that many months.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Councillor Ferguson.
Yeah, thank you, Angela. So our Blue Box program currently costs us $13 million. And as you said, we'll have to continue paying that up until the transition in 2025. That's a lot of money. And we look forward to being able to upload that to the producers of the product that has to be recycled. But does Toronto taxpayers and the others in stage 1 in 2023 get their savings right away in 2023 and we have to wait till 2025?
Yeah, so through the chair, basically they can transition, the province will start out on January 1st, 2023, and it could happen at any point in 2023 for those folks on that list. So they would be responsible for the portion of the program that they're still running up until the point that they transition. But in our opinion, we agree that it looks like those going first are going to start saving money sooner.
Okay, so you might want to consider to report back to us, asking the province to, through the transition period, which is 23 to 25, to share those savings to all the producers. And so if Toronto shouldn't get the 100% all at once, phase it in over 3 years and share that with the other municipalities who have to wait till 2025. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, and through the chair, as you'll know, currently the Blue Box program is 50% funded. So we do receive approximately 50% each year from Stewardship Ontario for the Blue Box program. So this year, for example, if the program cost $12.9 million in 2019, we're getting approximately $6.5 million for that. So another item that we don't know quite yet is, will that funding, that benefit that we receive right now, will that continue up until the point of transition, or is that going to cease at the beginning of the transition? So we should have some more information in the info update in the next couple of days, and then definitely some more information as we include our comments to send back.
When would your report be back to Public Works?
Well, we'd have to, sorry, through the chair, we'll talk about the report of the comments coming back to Public Works. We do have a November 30th Waste Management Advisory Committee meeting. So naturally that November 30th minutes would come back to a subsequent Public Works Committee.
So come back before November 30th then. We would see that before you send the comments off to the province?
So through the chair, what we'll do is I'll talk offline with Craig and Dan to see if we can do an info update in advance, or if we want to bring a staff recommendation report with the comments. But we definitely want to make sure that you're clear of what our comments and have the ability to comment on those before we send them back.
Okay, and the $6.5 million, is that net after you have the sale value of the recyclables, like the cans and the newspaper? That's net 6.5.
Yep, through the chair, that's correct. Yep.
Yeah, so that's a lot of money, $6.5 million. That should be shared during the transition period by all municipalities, not just the ones that are lucky enough to go first. So, Mr. Chairman, I also have a question on the report. Do you want me to ask that question now or wait till later?
No, we'll come back to that.
Okay, that's all I got.
Thank you. Councillor Pearson? Sorry, Councillor Pearson, you're not hearing your audio.
Sorry. Is that better? Thank you.
Yes.
So, Angela, thank you for the information that you've already provided. So by what you've told us, then the province has not aligned the start dates for all the communities to coincide with our contracts either. Is that correct?
Through the chair, that is correct.
So where do we land? And I forget it because we deal with so many contracts in waste management. Where do we land if we're not to start up until 2025 with our current contract?
Through the chair, we will be closer to the end of our contract if we were to transition in 2025. We factored those costs in if we were going to transition in 2023, which was our request, because we would be responsible for a part of that. And we would, the group that worked on that contract put in a clause so that we could get out early based on the transition. So we will definitely be closer to the end of the contract, but it just means we're going to be paying that contract longer.
And we're not concerned under the new format that whoever the body takes over pulls all these contractors away, and we run into a problem of not having ongoing servicing. Obviously, it's a little illegal issue, but I'm sure that's probably something that's out in the back of our minds right now.
Yeah, through the chair, we have to figure out who will be collecting.
And
where we're getting those assets from.
Right. And just lastly on that, because this is going to be a huge learning curve for the public as well, because I'm assuming now that it will be totally out of the hands of the City of Hamilton. We will no longer be providing blue boxes. We will no longer be providing information on blue boxes or going out when they're missed or things like that, correct?
Through the chair, that is correct. So something that we will see in the future is there will be a province-wide promotion and education campaign so that, you know, the one province, one system will exist for everybody. There is no doubt that the residents of our city are going to call you or email you, and they're going to call the customer contact center when they have issues with their recycling. So we still need to know the programs very well, because I can imagine that we'll be receiving the first call before sending it off to whoever needs to look after responding to those.
Thank you. And that's something that we should also keep in mind as we do our annual calendars going forward, once we know, have more concrete information that we can start providing to the citizens to get them ready. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Angela.
Thank you, Councillor. And finally, questions for Angela. We have Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess my prime question is in line with a couple of other councillors, and you know, I said from day one, there needs to be equity when we're dealing with other levels of government. There's no equity when larger centers get a 2-year benefit in regards to cost savings to their taxpayers that another community does not get to enjoy. So I too would want to echo a push for equity when they start the program to when they finish it. That all municipalities proportionally will benefit from whatever savings may be realized. So I want to put that into a motion form at the appropriate time.
Okay. Technically, nothing's on the floor right now, so you can file that with clerks and bring that back to our next.
Can I get clerks just to write it up, and I'll bring it to maybe through the council meeting, directly to council.
Okay.
Because it's basically lobbying the provincial government. The sooner we get the message to them as a unity, the better.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. No further questions for Manager Story. Oh, Councillor Pearson.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, Councillor Whitehead just tweaked me. So Angela, currently we do make money off our recyclable products. So we sell it and we make money off it. So that's going to be the difference between the communities that now are directed on the provincial level to what we have, because we still will have an opportunity to make profit until 2025, correct?
Through the chair, that is correct. So if we don't have any ability to change the current date of 2025 for Hamilton, we would have our exact program that we have today would continue until we transition, which include being responsible for paying for the program, but also benefiting from the revenues of anything that gets sold.
Right. I just want to be sure that my colleagues are aware of that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. No further questions to Councillor Whitehead?
For clarification, I mean, I thought in the original report that staff provided us, the reason why they selected the date that they did, which was 2023, was that was all part of the consideration is the profits we make, the cost of providing the service, and at the end of the day, there's a greater savings when we give it up versus relying on the profits. So can I just make sure we don't leave this conversation thinking that we're actually making a profit from the program to cover the cost?
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Whitehead, we do not cover the cost of our program with the sales of our recyclables. And that is why we recommended 2023 so that we could start saving that budget pressure sooner.
I just want to make sure that's how we left it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Good clarification. No further discussion or questions to Manager Stories. Thank you, Angela, for the update.
Yep.
And then I'm going to come back to the item that's on the floor, which is the solid waste management bylaw update. And Councillor Ferguson, I believe you had a question.
Yes, I do. And I see what we're the main change, or the only change to the bylaws being proposed, is that we give the general manager delegated authority to make changes to the waste management program. And of course, nothing's more sensitive to ratepayers than having their garbage picked up. And every time you change it, you confuse the daylights out of them. And it results in a lot of calls, a lot of misconfusion. And the latest was when we stopped taking black plastic. So, you know, I fully trust Dan to do the right thing. But, you know, the next guy that comes along after Dan may be a dictator like we had in a city manager at one time, which I have delegated authority, get out of my way. And so I just need to understand, are we giving carte blanche authority to change any of the items without first at least going back to the Waste Management Committee? Is that the intent? I know they want to get approval on changes quickly as the marketplace changes, but if we suddenly say no more newspaper, and yeah, I think committee should be involved in that decision if in fact, if that kind of extreme change is made. So I wonder if Dan could, or somebody, maybe Ryan or Craig, who are the authors of the report, could explain this to us. What's the limitations on the delegated authority?
And Angela, is that you?
Yeah.
I see Craig's come on.
Great. Yes, I could take this, Mr.
Craig.
Chair. So Craig Murdoch, Director of Environmental Services. So through the chair, Councillor Ferguson, the intent is not to change a lot of the service levels or collection frequency, things like that. The only things that, well, the GM will have the ability to change is what can be recycled and what kind of containers people can use. That's common in the industry for other municipalities to have. It makes us a little more fleet-footed in the example you've used, like black plastic is a good example, because it takes months and months for us to change the bylaw, and yet we were enforcing that bylaw change without having the bylaw itself modified. So the only things the GM would have the authority to change again are the types of materials and the containers that you put those materials into for collection. There wouldn't be any heavy-handedness to this, of course, because if you look at the report, we have outlined the process that we would follow, and that process includes an information update to committee and council to make sure that there are no objections before we file the change with the clerks.
Okay, that makes me feel comfortable. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Did you have anything to add, Angela?
Nope. Nope, Craig covered it through the chair. Thanks.
Thank you. Any further discussion from committee? I'm not seeing any, so I need a mover and seconder to approve the recommendation in the report. Moved by Councillor Pearson, seconded by Councillor Vanderbeek. All in favor? Councillor Farr, Councillor Marula, give me the affirmative, and Councillor Whitehead's giving me the thumbs up as well. Thank you. That carries. On, so we have the two motions that are on the agenda, and then we're going to add Councillor Marula has a motion regarding lead services. So first of all, we'll go to item 10.1, the retaining wall repair at 9 Patrick Street in Ward 2. Councillor Farr, you can introduce your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and this is seconded by Councillor Collins. Respecting the retaining wall repair at 9 Patrick Street in Hamilton Ward 2, whereas the property at 9 Patrick is in Ward 2, it's owned by the City of Hamilton. The grade meets the sidewalk, and debris that includes rocks, blocks, bricks, sticks continues to fall and block safe passage for residents. And I should note, staff have repeatedly gone and cleaned it up, but it keeps happening. Whereas Patrick Street is located along the escarpment and the grading is steep, hence every property owner but the City of Hamilton has built retaining wall as a means of addressing slope stability, aesthetics, accessibility, and community safety. And whereas recent weather changes and erosion has resulted in this historic issue becoming serious to the residents of Corktown and especially Patrick Street. Therefore, be it resolved, A, that the appropriate staff be authorized and directed as a priority to construct a retaining wall along the frontage of 9 Patrick Street in Hamilton to address roadway and sidewalk safety concerns which negatively impact accessibility. B, that the estimated cost, $15,000 to construct a retaining wall at 9 Patrick Street, Hamilton, be funded from the Ward 2 Special Capital Reserve Investment, and it's identified there. And C, that the mayor and the city clerk be authorized and directed to execute any agreements and ancillary docs with such terms and conditions in a form satisfactory to the city solicitor. I don't really need to speak to it. I think the whereases and the therefores say it all, and I thank Councillor Collins for seconding.
Thank you, Councillor. Any discussion on the motion? Not seeing any. All in favor? Councillor Marula, preemptive thumbs up. Thank you. That carries. On to 10.2, an appeal to Metrolinx to resume all-day GO bus service. Councillor Farr, you have the floor.
Yes, back to its previous intervals. And before I do that, I forgot to thank Edward Soldo on the previous motion. He was very helpful with wording and staffing. 10.2 is the appeal to Metrolinx to resume all-day GO bus service in Hamilton, whereas GO bus services is operated by Metrolinx and is the only public bus transportation choice for Hamiltonians wishing to travel between Hamilton and Toronto. Whereas on April the 8th, 2020, Metrolinx ceased much of the operation of the traditional all-day frequent express GO bus service from Hamilton to Toronto, whereas Metrolinx ceased this valuable express service near the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, and there is no sign of resumption of the service. And I'm going to amend this on the fly. That should say Metrolinx ceased these aspects of this valuable express. They didn't kill it all together. They just took a lot of buses away off peak. And I'll fix that before council. I'm sorry, I just caught that. Whereas for off-peak times, the Constellation GO bus service Metrolinx offers is an hourly double-decker bus to Aldershot, where accessibility is a troubling issue for some passengers that can only be accommodated on the much smaller footprint lower level of the bus. The more spacious upper level is inaccessible to many passengers who are disabled, elderly, or wanting to keep a close eye on luggage that can only be stored in the lower level. Therefore, be it resolved that the mayor be requested to submit correspondence to the Ministry of Transportation, Metrolinx, and the Premier of Ontario to call for the resumption of all-day express bus service levels from Hamilton to Toronto at the service level observed prior to April 8th, 2020. And this is seconded by Councillor Collins. And to be very brief, I want to say thanks to a few residents that have approached me since, one in and around mid-April, and more recently I had quite a conversation with another Dr. Gilbert in this ward as well, and he helped me fabricate this motion, as a matter of fact, and I love it when I can engage with residents to actually put motions on the floor. We're asking Metrolinx to respond to this. I didn't get any indication at the time. It tweaked my interest at the time when the announcement was made that this was COVID-19 related. I'm certain we'll at some point soon get a response should this pass and ultimately be ratified at council from Metrolinx. And maybe in that response, we'll get a better understanding of why these cuts occurred. But I think what we've laid out here in this motion is probably some aspects that maybe weren't contemplated at the time the cuts were presented. And particularly with our disabled residents or our elderly residents who travel off peak. And if for anybody who grew up in the Hammer, there's a lot of that, and there continues to be a lot of that. And I would argue that while we may have a blip now with commuters and a whole bunch of telecommuting that's taking place in Hamilton and throughout the world, we're going to come out of this. And, you know, we even talked about it earlier today. Here in Public Works, there's obviously mandates of this and previous councils as it relates to getting people to get out of the car and travel in these means. It's the reason why Metrolinx exists. And I think part of the issue here is the fact that I think the double-decker buses were a great idea. You can fit more passengers, but there's very limited room in the lower level compared to the upper level, and there are certain individuals that can only ride in the lower level. And if you're traveling off peak and you have to wait an hour and you can only go to Aldershot, then you got it. There's that express, the whole express element is gone. Some of these folks are telling me they're taking like an hour and a half longer to get to their destinations along this major connection, Hamilton to Toronto corridor, historically a major GO connection, be it bus or rail. And I mean, that's something that maybe wasn't contemplated, as I say. So hopefully this is just me asking the mayor on behalf of council to communicate with Metrolinx that this is an issue, to consider getting us back to those historic levels, and understanding that, you know, there are people out there that I think a growing number of people that refer to this city as, you know, the Brooklyn to Toronto. And certainly there's continues to be a push for and a growth of former Toronto residents starting a new life here in Hamilton, but still having a lot of reasons to go to and fro. So I think the market is there. Maybe there's a blip right now during the pandemic, Mr. Chairman, but I'm certain that it'll resume and be healthier and stronger. And so rather than cut this valuable historic service, and there's only one, there's no more Greyhound or anything else anymore, that we give it a second thought and try to bring it back. So I appreciate the second again from Councillor Collins, and I appreciate everyone's time, including the constituents who helped me formulate what's before us.
Thank you, Councillor. Any discussion on the motion that is before us? Not seeing any. Nope. Okay. Moved by Councillor Farr, seconded by Councillor Collins. All in favor? And Councillor Marula, you're in the affirmative. Yes, thank you. That is carries unanimously. Thank you. And I will come to you, Councillor Marula, for your motion on lead services. Go ahead.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. This is in relation to the feasibility of accelerating the lead water service line replacement options report in today's agenda. And in consulting with Mike Zagaric as well as our own water staff, I'm bringing forward a motion that's moved by myself and seconded by yourself, Mr. Chairman, that staff be directed to report back to the Public Works Committee on funding options for a 5-year and 10-year funding plan utilizing water, wastewater, and stormwater rates, general levy, or any other level of government subsidy opportunities related to the capital and operating costs. This is somewhat timely. I've received word from the federal government, particularly Bob Bettina, as well as others who have actually communicated that Catherine McKinnon is actually working on a plan specifically targeting this lead replacement program, which is a national program. So it's good to be up at the front of the line asking for these types of funds. And apparently it's not imminent, but it's in the near future, and I look forward to that coming to fruition. As everyone knows, there's a direct correlation between lead and water and public health issues, particularly among children. It would be remiss of us not to commend former Councillor Bob Bertina and now MP Bob Bertina, who did bring this to the forefront while he was a councillor. We're now taking it a step further. We've known what the presenting problem is. We now have a plan, and now we have to find the money. So this motion hopefully will be a little step towards doing that, and I look forward to your support. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. Any discussion on the motion that's on the floor? Not seeing any. And just a quick question from me through to water staff, if they're still on the line. Andrew, how many lead services are there still in the city of Hamilton that are on the list for replacement?
Just coming in here, can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
Okay, so through you, Mr. Chairman, we still have approximately 20,000 lead services in our system. I know that's a number that has been stated for a few years now, but we've gained better accuracy in our database and all the information that we have. So we're very confident in that number, and we do replace about 800 services a year on any given year. So that number is continuing to decrease.
Thank you. Those are all my questions. So not seeing any further discussion. Oh, Councillor Pearson.
Hi, Mr. Chairman. Sorry, I clicked the red button, but it's not coming up. Andrew's still there. Thank you. Andrew, can I just ask, though, good news on what you're saying, that we're reducing the lines every year. Was it not a year or so ago that we put an additive on our lines, and was that not to help with regards to the lead also?
So through you, Mr. Chairman, that is correct. Back in 2018, I believe it was, we started dosing our orthophosphate-based program. So that is also creating a film on the inside of the pipe that is preventing lead from leaching into the drinking water. So really, this is kind of a multi-barrier approach. So we've got our orthophosphate-based program, but also our lead service replacement. So we're ensuring that the drinking water getting to our homeowners is clean and safe as possible.
Excellent. And we've never had any spikes as far as concerns. I understand and certainly support of this going forward from Councillor Marula, but I just want to be sure we're not alarming the public that, we have not had any spikes with regards to lead in our drinking water up until now, correct?
No, so through you, Mr. Chairman, our results are actually showing very favorable results from our orthophosphate-based program. We will see a report come to Public Works Committee, I think in Q1 of 2021, which is kind of with an update on how things are going and the kind of the reductions that we're seeing. But so far, it is achieving very good results for us.
Thank you. And you answered my next question. Thank you very much, Andrew. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Ferguson.
Yeah, Andrew, just want to get refreshed on this. I recall during the debate when Councillor Bertina brought it up, and then as mayor also, he brought it up. And this has been a passion of his for a long time. But I remember, in addition to the two options, the two actions we're already taking, we asked the question, where's the risk? The risk is when the water sits in the service overnight for an extended period of time. And that the question was asked, how long do you have to let the tap run in order to clear the overnight water that's sitting in that service, as a way of just letting the public know who have left water services how they can clear it out. And the answer we got, you need to flush the toilet, which most people do first thing in the morning anyway. And is that still correct?
Through Mr. Chairman, we actually prefer that you flush your lines for longer, so that's a good opportunity to plug our website. We have a lot of great information on our City of Hamilton website for lead services and living with a lead service and how you can identify it and what you can do. And the recommendation there is that you flush your tap for 5 minutes in the morning to remove all of the stagnant water that's in your system and ensure that that water is then safe for you and your family to drink.
And would that be 2 flushes of the toilet then?
I would encourage you to run a kitchen faucet, I think or a bathroom faucet is probably the easiest way, or sorry, I would prefer a kitchen faucet because that is primarily where you're drinking from. So it's important to get the water out of the system at your kind of primary drinking source. So I would say that is more than 2 flushes of the toilet. 5 minutes of running water is what are required to clear your line.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further discussion? Not seeing any, and obviously it'd be great to get some support from upper levels of government for this. So all in favor? Myself. Sorry, Elsie Davenport was just asking who the seconder was. Councillor Whitehead? Oh, we got you. Thank you. Everybody, thank you. That passes unanimously. On to notices of motion. Are there any notices of motion from committee? Not seeing any. Okay, on to general information. We have the amendments to the outstanding business list. I need a mover and a seconder to approve the amendments to the outstanding business list. Moved by Councillor Carson, seconded by Councillor Ferguson and Councillor Whitehead on the outstanding business list.
No, general statements, Mr. Chair.
Okay, well, let's approve the outstanding business and I'll come back to you. Councillor Ferguson?
Yeah, I want to point out 12.1B D. This is the eligibility for darts, and this was a great debate during the transit presentation and during the 2020 budget. And so our accounting staff, our audit staff have had almost a year now to do this audit. And now they're asking for another extension to December the 7th, which is the last Public Works meeting of the year. And then we go into a 2-week shutdown over Christmas, get back the 2nd week of January, and we almost immediately go into transit day again. So I'm just concerned we won't have enough time at December 7th to be able to absorb this, give staff direction, so that Debbie can include it in her whatever changes there may or may not be in the transit budget. Is Debbie still online? I see her name still here.
I believe so.
So Debbie, can I ask you a question?
Here she is.
Through the chair, Debbie Dalvido, Director of Transit. Absolutely, Councillor.
Thanks, Debbie. So Debbie, if we don't get this report until August the 7th, the transit day is what, the 3rd week of January, January typically?
So through the chair, that's correct.
Do you think by December 7th and then ratify council on the 14th or 15th, you would have time if we make some changes to make that adjustment in your transit day budget?
So through the chair, I think the timeline would be problematic in regards to completing the presentation and any specific report that I may be required to bring back based on the audit's recommendations.
Is anybody from audit on the line? I'm curious to know why they need another extension. This is the second or third time we've done this.
I don't think anybody from audit's in the meeting.
Maybe the legislative coordinator can ask just for a consent item next Public Works meeting why they need this much more time, because it takes us too darn close to the transit day in early January. Would that be a reasonable request, Mr. Chairman, to have Alicia pass that on to Mr. Brown?
Yeah, we can pass that on.
Okay. I'll let Alicia take that. I'm sorry?
I think Debbie just had her hand up. I'm not sure if she
okay.
has anything additional to add.
So through the chair, we are going to be meeting with the Charles staff at the end of this week to review their initial report back. My understanding is, I guess, the lead time is specific around the deadlines to get the report completed and submitted to clerks. And given the timing around the audit that they did complete or the work they've done to date, that's why December 7th, the Public Works Committee was targeted given that. But
okay, I'm just going to have Debbie, maybe you can convey that to Charles too. I'd like to get a reason why we're delaying this again, because it's going to push us too tight into having a good, wholesome discussion and a decision for you to prepare your 2021 budget. If you could pass that along to him, that would be great.
so through the chair, I'd be happy to do that, Councillor, and certainly can circle back with you offline once I speak to Charles.
I'd appreciate that. That's all, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. So we have the amendments to outstanding business list moved by Councillor Ferguson, seconded by Councillor Ferguson. All in favor? Councillor Collins and Councillor Farr. See the affirmative from Councillor Collins and Councillor Brewer. We got Councillor Farr's vote. Yep. Okay. That passes. Then Councillor Whitehead, you had something you wanted to add?
Yeah. So, Mr. Just following the issue in my ward in respect to traffic loads on Scenic and Aberdeen pre-COVID period in the after event of Aberdeen. And of course, we don't know what the future lies, and we're going to have to follow through the pilot program, and I respect that. But for clarification, the issue is that because of the loads that the West Mountain gets in the morning, people obviously try to avoid those traffic loads on arterial roads, and therefore they cut through the neighborhoods, and that's where the real safety issues are and concerns emanate. So it's not just because Garth and West Fifth and Scenic get loaded at times, but it pushes traffic into the internal neighborhoods where I often get complaints from parents and even teachers in respect to the cut through traffic. So I want to just clarify that. Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Councillor Ferguson?
I have a question for Mr. Soto. Edward, I got an email from you that, council approved the short piece of sidewalk on Fiddler's Green Road in my ward because there's a safety issue of kids walking to school where there's a piece of sidewalk missing. And you had us amended that you would, at the request of the MTO, have a consultant do a report on the bridge. Well, apparently now I got the email from you that, from someone that you can't do it till the spring because you can't get the consultant in place, or the MTO hasn't had an opportunity to review it until next spring. That troubles me. The kids are walking it anyway. They're crossing the bridge and then they're walking down the side of the road in order to get to where the sidewalk is in place. Can you explain to me why we can't put the sidewalk in tandem with getting the MTO report done? Because to put it off the next spring during the winter months, the kids walking on the side of the road, just it looks like MTO bureaucracy is getting in the way of health and safety. And so Why can't we just put the sidewalk in and then deal with the ministry at the same time through the winter?
Director Soldo?
Can you hear me, Councillor?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair to the Councillor, Edward Solo, Director of Transportation Operations and Maintenance. In terms of the work that's being done, we actually do have a consultant on board, and they are taking care of it. We can't implement the solution. We know what the solution is. It's actually very straightforward. But unfortunately, we cannot implement the solution until we get permit from the MTO, because it is their property, and they're within the right-of-way control for the MTO. So unfortunately, until we get a permit from them, we can't implement the solution. And as an interim measure, because I do agree with you, Councillor, it's an unsafe situation. I've instructed staff to go out and at least delineate that portion of roadway with bollards, so that we provide some more clear delineation and allow for more of a highlighted sense of awareness for drivers as they go by there, that there will be pedestrians in that area. So unfortunately, we have had numerous discussions with MTO to try to move this forward. But until we get a permit from them, we can't implement it.
Okay, because the children are already crossed the bridge. They have all along. And nothing's going to change if you put the sidewalk in. What do you mean by a bollard? Is that a plastic pylon? Is that a TC54, or is that precast concrete barrier? What do you mean by pylons or bollards?
It's similar, through the chair to council, similar to the bollards that we've seen in downtown and various areas that we use just to highlight the edge of the roadway. So
sure, the plastic sticks in that they bolt down.
That's correct. Anything beyond that would be considered construction by the MPO.
Okay, and Mr. Chairman, this deeply concerns me that bureaucracy is getting in the way of fixing a very serious health and safety problem with children walking on the edge of the road, particularly during the winter months. I know I can't instruct our staff to, or council can't instruct our staff to break the law and do it without a permit. So I don't know whether, Dan, you have another suggestion, or Edward, you have another suggestion, or do we just suck it up? Then I'll be quiet on this after that.
Through the chair to the councillor, I can assure you that we have taken many steps in terms of raising the issue here with higher levels of staff. We're hoping to expedite the process as quickly as we can.
Do they think the parapet wall's not high enough, or the railing's not high enough? What's their concern?
Through the chair to the councillor, it actually requires a realignment of the existing guide rail that's in that area. It requires some sloping as well. So they want to look at how we're going to change the existing guide rail, what that means in terms of the slopes, and as well as the stormwater runoff in that area.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
MTO bureaucracy is truly legendary.
No further items of additional business, so we can go to adjournment. Need a mover and a seconder to adjourn. I see Councillor Nan has a awesome Halloween picture. So moved by Councillor Nan, seconded by Councillor Pearson for adjournment. And just to give you an update, my window has updated itself. It took about 45 minutes. So thank you, City Hamilton IT, for scheduling that during today's meeting. All in favor of adjournment? What do you need, Councillor? We got it. Thank you, everybody. Take care.